The basement door. The house stood alone at the end of Willow Creek Road, a wide gray shape with perfect windows and a yard too still for the wind to touch. Michael and Sarah had moved in only 2 weeks earlier, calling it a fresh start, a place to build something new with their 6-year-old son, Ben. It was one of those new developments that promised everything: clean air, quiet nights, and distance from the noise of the city. From the outside, the house looked flawless, freshly painted, neat, and untouched. But inside, something about it felt too silent. The walls didn't creak. The air didn't hum. Even the sound of footsteps seemed to fade too quickly, as if the house didn't like to remember noise. Michael noticed it first. The basement. The door was in the hallway between the kitchen and the laundry room. It didn't match the rest of the house: rougher wood, older, slightly darker in color. The handle was new, but the doorframe was cracked, as if something had been nailed shut and then forced open long ago. When they moved in, Sarah told him to leave it alone. "It's just storage," she said. But there was no key, no light switch, and no sign that anyone had ever gone down there in years. At night, the air near that part of the house was colder. Sometimes, while walking past it, Michael could swear he heard a faint tapping sound, like something small striking the other side of the wood. The first few days, he ignored it. Then he started noticing the smell. It wasn't rot or mold, more like iron. Faint, metallic, and sharp. It lingered strongest near the basement door. When he checked the floorboards, they looked normal, but the smell came and went like breath, stronger at night, gone by morning. Sarah started waking up tired. She said she kept having the same dream, of standing in the hallway, hearing someone call Ben's name from below the floor. In the dream, she would walk to the basement door, put her hand on the knob, and then wake up before opening it. Michael laughed it off at first. But when Ben began to mention the whispering lady, he stopped laughing. Ben said she lived under the house. She wasn't mean, he said, just sad. Sometimes she hummed songs through the floor, and sometimes she asked him questions. He said her voice sounded like it was coming from behind the walls. Michael tried to tell himself it was just a child's imagination. But then Ben started drawing her. A thin woman with long black hair, no eyes, and a mouth too small to smile. Always standing behind a wooden door. Always waiting. By the end of the first week, Sarah began to notice the floor near the basement door felt uneven, like the wood was swelling. When Michael pressed his ear against it, he heard a slow, rhythmic thump. Too steady to be random. Too heavy to be pipes. That night, while Sarah slept, Michael decided to open the door. The handle was cold. The kind of cold that feels wet. He turned it slowly, expecting to hear a click, but instead it gave way too easily, almost as if it had been waiting. The hinges groaned, the sound traveling down the walls like a shiver. The smell of metal rushed out, stronger now, mixed with dust and something sour. The flashlight beam barely reached the bottom of the stairs. The basement looked small, unfinished, just concrete walls and a dirt floor. But there was another door down there, smaller, half buried behind wooden beams. He only stared at it for a few seconds before closing the main door again. But that was enough. The next morning, the entire house felt different. The air was heavier. The quiet deeper. Every reflection, in the mirrors, in the windows, seemed to hold a faint shadow that didn't belong. Sarah started hearing knocking at night. It wasn't random, it came in threes, always from the same direction, under the kitchen floor. When she asked Ben if he'd heard it, he said the whispering lady was angry now. He said she wanted her door open again. Michael tried to find out more about the land. The development company's website was polished and new, but the local archive still had old survey records. The lot had been part of an estate before, demolished after a fire in the late 1800s. The name of the owner was unreadable on the record, ink burned and smudged. But the note in the margin was still visible. Cellar sealed. Do not disturb. That night, Sarah dreamed again. Only this time, she didn't wake up before opening the basement door. She said she saw something beyond it, a woman in a burned dress, holding a candle, her face blackened and shifting like smoke. In the morning, she found ashes on the hallway floor. Just a small pile, directly in front of the basement door. From that day, the tapping became louder. The sound of fingernails on wood. Sometimes, when Michael walked past the door, he could feel something, faint movement, as if the wood itself was breathing. He tried to ignore it. But the moment came when ignoring wasn't possible. It happened 3 nights later. He was half asleep when Ben's voice echoed down the hallway, soft, calling for his mother. Michael got up, went to Ben's room, and found it empty. The sheets were on the floor, and the window was still locked. The basement door was open. The air coming from below was colder than any air he'd felt before. It carried the sound of water dripping and a faint melody, humming, familiar, almost like the lullaby Sarah used to sing to Ben when he was a baby. He stepped down, slowly, flashlight trembling. The walls seemed wet. The dirt floor shone faintly in the beam. At the far end, the smaller door was wide open, and Ben was standing in front of it, staring into the darkness beyond. Michael called his name, but the sound didn't echo. It just disappeared. Ben turned around slowly, his face blank. His lips moved, but the voice that came out wasn't his. "She's not done yet." Michael froze at the base of the stairs. The air was thick enough to taste, heavy with the smell of iron and earth. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied, pale light falling across the small open door. The space beyond was black, swallowing everything it touched. Ben didn't move. He stood perfectly still, his back straight, head tilted slightly to one side as if listening to something just below the edge of sound. The hum in the air rose and fell like breath. Michael reached for him, but the closer he stepped, the more wrong the air felt. It vibrated, faint, invisible, alive. The wood beneath his feet creaked with pressure, like something inside it was pushing up. He pulled Ben back, and the instant he did, the humming stopped. The silence that followed was not empty, it was aware. It listened back. He carried Ben upstairs, locked the door, and didn't look back. The boy didn't speak the rest of the night. By morning, the basement door had changed. The surface was darker, stained, warped, and breathing faintly as if the grain itself pulsed. Around the edges of the frame, a black dust had begun to seep out, leaving streaks like burned fingerprints. Sarah wanted to leave. She said the walls were whispering, that she could hear voices when the house was quiet. Not words, not full sentences, but sounds that tried to shape meaning. Michael didn't argue. He packed their bags. But when they tried to open the front door, the handle snapped clean off in his hand. The air in the living room was colder than outside. Frost bloomed along the glass of the windows in perfect spirals. The house wasn't letting them go. That night, they didn't sleep. They stayed in the bedroom, lights on, Ben between them. The whispering started again, low and steady from the floorboards. It sounded like someone pacing underneath. Slow steps. Dragging. Then came the knock. 3 times. The same rhythm they'd heard before. Sarah buried her face in her hands. Michael just stared at the door across the hallway, the one he'd opened. The one that had never wanted to stay closed. By dawn, Ben was gone. His blanket was on the floor, but his footprints led only halfway down the hall before vanishing. The house was silent again. Michael went to the basement door. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat rising off asphalt. When he touched the handle, it burned cold. The door opened on its own. The basement was darker than before, though no light had changed. The small door at the far end was gone. In its place was something else, a wall of packed earth, uneven, carved with marks that looked like fingernails. As he stepped closer, the humming began again. This time, he could hear words forming within it. A woman's voice. "Give me back what was taken." The words repeated, slower, heavier, filled with pain that sounded older than the house itself. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm. Sarah came down behind him, shaking, holding one of Ben's drawings, the one of the woman with no eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper. "She's real, Michael. She's been under us the whole time." He didn't answer, because he could see it now. The faint outline of a body pressed into the wall, the shape of a woman's head, shoulders, hands reaching forward, frozen mid-scream. The humming rose into a cry. The wall began to bleed dust. The sound of nails dragging across stone filled the air. "Give it back," the voice said again, louder, furious, raw. Michael dropped to his knees. He didn't know what she wanted. Then he saw the floor. It wasn't dirt anymore. It was a pattern, circles, carved deep, symbols repeating over and over, all leading to the center. And in the middle, a single thing lay half buried, a small silver locket, blackened by time. He picked it up. The air shifted instantly. The humming stopped. The silence returned, but it wasn't calm. It waited. Inside the locket was a picture, faint but visible, a woman and a small child. Both faces burned, half gone, but the outlines were enough. The same eyes as Ben. The same shape of mouth. Sarah whispered, "She lost her child in the fire." The house groaned above them. The floorboards popped like knuckles. Michael felt something move in the air, not around him, but through him. A cold weight pressing against his chest, his lungs, his heart. He understood then. The spirit had been buried alive when the old estate burned. Her child never found. The basement door wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep her in. Sarah screamed as the walls began to shift. The face in the earth opened its mouth, wider and wider, the soil cracking around it like skin. "Give me back my son," the voice shrieked, louder now, shaking the ceiling. Michael looked at the locket, then at Ben's room above. He felt it, the pull between both places. The spirit wanted to take what she lost. But Ben wasn't hers. He stepped forward, holding the locket out. The voice rose into a scream so violent the air fractured. He threw it into the center of the floor. The carvings lit up, not with flame, but with light that felt old and cold and final. The sound that followed was not human. A cry that folded in on itself, twisting through the walls, echoing into the bones of the house. The ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air burst with pressure, and then silence. When the dust settled, the basement was empty. The walls smooth. The carvings gone. Only the faint outline of the door remained, sealed into the stone like it had never been open. Michael and Sarah found Ben asleep upstairs. He didn't remember leaving his room. He didn't remember the voice. They never spoke of it again. They sealed the basement themselves, boards, nails, chains, concrete over the frame. Then they left everything inside. Furniture, clothes, memories, all of it. When they finally walked out, the air outside felt thin and bright, the kind of light that doesn't belong to night or day. They never went back. The house stayed standing, empty and perfect, waiting. And underneath the floor, something faint began to tap again. Slow. Careful. Like the sound of nails on wood.